Rapidly, the nation of Argentina, Tucson actually planted the first church into Buenos Aires, Argentina. From Prescott, we planted 3 churches. Jacksonville, North Carolina planted a church. Spain has a church there. Mexico has planted churches there. And in the early days, there was waves of revival. And so when, right about the time that Tucson started planting, and Australia planted as well I think they planted 2 into Argentina. It just happened to coincide that there was a national revival. Something very powerful was happening in the nation of Argentina. And so the response was very powerful. I have photos here. This is from the trumpet. And you see this is a couple, Kim Pensinger, Kim and Josie in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And initially, tremendous response. Australia planted the Zapatas into a city called Rosario in Argentina. And the response was initially tremendous in Argentina. But then there came problems in the nation. They had conflicts between pastors and churches. You had men that made foolish decisions. There were character issues. There were all kinds of problems of various kinds. And so what happened is that response initially, it changed. I think these are early days. This is in Rosario when I'm preaching there. And just was a tremendous response, some incredible miracles back in the day. But the response changed. And so what happened is that it was no longer in an atmosphere of revival. And the majority of the churches in Argentina for quite some time, they struggled. They were not doing well. They were struggling very much. So here's a lesson that I want to give you, and it has to do with the power of leadership. A Bible principle has to do with leadership. God chooses men. The work is all God, but God has leaders, and leaders in many ways can hinder the work of God, or they can release the work of God. Joshua 1, verse 6.
Be strong and of good courage, for to this people you shall divide as an inheritance the land which I swore to their fathers to give them.
Principle is God is speaking to a man, to a leader, Joshua, and he says, you shall divide for an inheritance the land for the people. In other words, God blesses you through a leader. That's a Bible principle. So now we're talking in a nation. So I want you to think about this. This is actually an amazing story. Buenos Aires, the original pastor left. Another man took over, and he had issues. He had a lot of strange things at work in him. There was a young couple in the church that had gotten saved under the first pastor, Juan Pablo and Silvina Cardo. And Juan Pablo is now in the church, and for whatever reason, the pastor that took over disliked him. I don't know if he was threatened by him or whatever. He would not allow Juan Pablo to have any form of ministry in the church at all. 0. You will do nothing for 7 years. This is incredible. Like, what did I do wrong? He would not tell him, but he was forbidden to have any form of ministry for 7 years. And I have seen people that someone is mean to them for 15 minutes and they can barely stay saved. They looked at me funny. They said, my baby has big ears. I can't even live. 7 years, he stayed in the church. He didn't leave. And amazingly, he kept his heart right. And so finally, that man moved on. I don't know where he went. He no longer is in the fellowship. But Harold Warner the pastor of Tucson made a change, and he asked Juan Pablo to become the pastor of the church in Buenos Aires. So immediately when he came, I don't know if this was in a Tucson conference or in Prescott, I think it was maybe a Prescott conference he came to Pastor Mitchell, and he said, Pastor Mitchell, I have now taken over in Argentina. He said, you know the many problems that we've had in the nation. He said, what can I do? What steps can I take to help the nation of Argentina? And my father told him, you have to bring leadership to come preach, because leaders have a different dimension, and that will also bring you growth. So he said, okay, but the problem was many leaders knew of the problems. They weren't excited about going to Argentina. And so he said, Pastor Mitchell, will you help me? And so he said, yes. And so the first one he went to was Pastor Paul Stevens. He said, Pastor Stevens, Pastor Wayman Mitchell wants you to come to Argentina. And so he did. God bless him. He persuaded my father to come. He had not been there for many years after our investment. Previously, my father began to come, and then in time, once I was on staff, I began going, I don't remember what year, 2008, it seems like maybe 2009, somewhere in that region. But I began to come, and now I go there every year. One of the things that I do is that I do sermon workshops. I teach pastors how to put together sermons, how to find revelation, how to preach. This was the last one. I think there we had 58 or 60. There were somewhere about 60 pastors from Argentina, even South American nations that are there. That has been very, very powerful. Juan Pablo says that has been very, very helpful in the nation. We have their next photo. They just celebrated their 37th anniversary, and the work that God has done, they are continuing on. Very, very powerful. Under the leadership of Juan Pablo Cardo is that God has turned the atmosphere, the spirit of a nation. There is now a powerful move of God in Argentina again. I mean, revival. When they plant churches, the churches are growing rapidly. We have some photos. This is Santa Fe. That's a church that we originally invested in. We sent George and Irish Shields there. Our investment continues. The church in Santa Fe doing well. Next photo, this is a men's discipleship that they did in the area. That is all men from Argentina, and that is the work that God is doing. For many years, Juan Pablo and the church in Buenos Aires, they were in this tiny little tunnel of a building. It was very, very small, and it was hurting his growth, but he came across a building. The building they were able to get, God helped them supernaturally. This building, they have 3 floors, and on each floor they can seat 400 people. I have a video of this building. This is a rally that I preached just this year when I was there. This is just the bottom floor that were here. There were 400 on the bottom floor, and there were, I'm pulling this from memory, it seems like they had another 300 on the second floor watching on video as well. And I'm telling you, the work in Argentina, it is powering on. They have been planting churches. We have a photo from their last conference that was just all of these couples along the front. These are couples that they planted out in the last conference that was just in October, if I remember right. As of right now, there are 58 churches in Argentina, December 2023, and they have 3 churches in 3 other nations. They planted churches in Paraguay, in Uruguay, and Brazil. We need to thank God for what God has done in Argentina. Thank you, God, for the work that you've done and being allowed us to be a part of it. Thank God. Okay, that's all.